Join me to talk about the implications of this and how an individual should now look at crypto assets, crypto tokens, NFTs, cryptocurrencies, you name it, is Ajeet Khurana, who is expert and a founder of Genezis Network. Thank you so much, Ajeet, for taking the time. When we spoke yesterday, you said that there was a need to look at the fine print in a little bit more detail. I think quite a few of us have done that. Has your view solidified as to what the implications are?
So the implications of what is stated, I think, are now pretty clear. The challenge, which is where even you classifying it as somewhat contentious matter, is coming from what does this mean, as in what does this forecast for the future? That is where people are still different.
Okay, fair enough. But let's talk about a few of these things, right? You're talking about three main aspects of what was announced yesterday. The first is the tax. And you've had functionaries of the government. Ajeet, there is, for example, Finance Secretary T.V. Somanathan, who in an interview spoke about the fact that crypto assets are currently neither illegal nor are they encouraged. They are in a gray area. We have put in a taxation framework that treats crypto assets the same way as we treat winnings from horse races or bets or other speculative transactions. So is this a very clear message from the government?
So, the problem is that when you try to call something illegal, crypto never was. Even with the RBI banking ban, it was never illegal. But when you say, is it legal? The government is hesitating from saying that primarily because they fear they may be encouraging people to go all out. So I think that's a fair characterization. As far as comparing it to horse racing or betting or lotteries is concerned, I think that is a little stretched. For example, what would you set off losses? What losses would you set off against gains made in horse races? Nothing. Here, crypto profits can be set off against crypto losses, though they cannot be set off against losses from other classes. That is clear. So it is a limited analogy, I would say.
Well, one would argue, Ajeet, that you can set off losses made in horse racing by wins made in horse racing. And therefore, it is the same. And also the fact that the section that deals with lotteries is a section that also deals, in this case, with cryptocurrency and crypto assets. But having said that, this TDS of 1%, is that likely to be a bit of a spoke in the wheel in terms of transactions taking place in crypto? Because it mentions very clearly cash or kind or only kind as being a significant requirement for you to have that TDS collected.
Correct. So I think that for investors, people who buy and hold for some time, this 1% TDS is not so much of a challenge. The challenge is going to come if we are going to charge TDS on every transaction. And since often these transactions occur on different platforms, the buy side and the sell side, what that means is that the selling platform may not know your acquisition cost, hence they will levy the 1% on the entire transaction cost. If I am a person who transacts my same 100 rupees 10 times in a day, so I have effectively transacted 1,000 rupees, I am looking at like a 10% TDS for that day. And TDS refunds, if any, can only be claimed at the end of the assessment year and stuff. So for rapid frequency traders, this could definitely be a dampener.
Certainly. And also in terms of if a manufacturer, or in certain cases, Ajeet, we've spoken in the past where a cafe is offering the service to somebody to buy something in cryptocurrency. Do you think that's going to be put on the back burner somewhat now?
So one of the things that Reserve Bank of India and the Department of Economic Affairs, and frankly, everybody I have talked to in the establishment, all aspects of it, have been very, very clear about is that they don't want to permit the use of cryptocurrency in the payment system. So that thereby they don't want to allow it to undermine the sovereign rupee. So that cafe thing, where you could potentially buy, sell with crypto or other such mechanisms, e-commerce, etc. To begin with, I think that the first step of regulation in India was always going to be to not allow crypto to be used in a payment system. Of course, recent occurrences have put consumer protection and control over unbridled marketing way up there.
Certainly. That seems to be one of the intentions in which the finance secretary as well saying that they are trying not to encourage crypto trading. But I'm trying to understand also in terms of whether there is precedence, Ajeet, because you study regulations, you study developing markets, not just in India, you're looking at markets around the world. And one of the statements I think that has come out very clearly from the government is that they want to study the developing regulations for crypto assets globally before they decide on something. How do you see this space moving?
So very interestingly, there are two categories of regulations that I am looking all around the world. The largest nations, America, England, Canada, Australia, and to a large extent Singapore, have primarily taken their existing regulations, for example, money transfers regulation in US and e-money license regulations in the European Union, and they have evolved those to include cryptocurrency, as opposed to some of the tax haven kind of nations or the very financial offshore kind of nations such as Malta, Estonia, Bahamas, Bermuda, and a bunch of those. So I'm glad that India has taken the same path as the biggest economies in the world. And why I say that is because what we did yesterday in the budget was that we took our Income Tax Act, which is an existing, established, well-known act, and tweaked it to accommodate virtual digital assets. I hope that eventually, whether it is FEMA, whether it is the SEBI Act, and a bunch of other things, maybe the RBI Act, etc., will also accommodate cryptocurrency and thereby put us in line with the largest economies in the world.
It's interesting that you say that, Ajeet, because my next question has to do with the execution. One thing is the formulation of a law or legislation, in this case the tweaking of the Income Tax Act, and the other is the execution of that law. Do you think that it's going to be a challenge, considering that a large number of transactions in crypto actually happen outside the bounds of the regular monetary system?
I think that what has been proposed yesterday, fundamentally the execution challenge is going to come on the TDS front, because anyway citizens were required to self-assess their taxation for income. So whatever is the degree of compliance or lack of it is not restricted to crypto. So the TDS, when it comes to crypto exchanges, the ones who are located in India, I think they will be able to pretty easily. They have pretty robust systems from what I've seen. The challenge will come as in how are you going to implement this in cross-border? And secondarily, something that initiates at a crypto exchange, but then moves to a private wallet and maybe takes place beyond the purview of a licensed entity, such as in a decentralized exchange, there cannot be any TDS. So I think that the government's intent in putting the TDS itself was to put a trace that at least at some point in this multi-step transaction or transfer of wealth, if we have a view into the transaction chain, then probably we can ask the right questions when it comes to enforcing this. But in talking to, like, I'm not exaggerating, probably a few thousand people on various online channel discussions since yesterday, I'm referring to the likes of Twitter Spaces, Clubhouse, etc. What I have found is that everybody who is buying and selling crypto is now talking about this. So I do visualize this leading to some higher degree of self or voluntary compliance once the regulations are clear.
All right, let's come to the bottom line or the moot point, if you can call it that, which is that there will be a lot of people that have been talking about the original purpose of Bitcoin, which was disintermediation, and the fact that monetary authorities, governments around the world are unlikely to be very favorable towards the large-scale adoption of crypto as not just mode of transaction, but well, you can call it that, right? Because even if it's an investment, it can be used to transact. So is there a fear? How does the individual look at crypto now?
So disintermediation is a very good word in the financial industry. In fact, CBDCs, which RBI themselves will be bringing out, is probably to assist people who are unbanked be able to still make digital transactions of money. The challenge that we are really getting down to is decentralization, which means not just do you remove intermediaries, you remove the entire central authority. And that is the reason why central bankers around the world, barring of course in the nation of El Salvador, which has accepted Bitcoin as legal tender, but barring that one exception, nowhere has there been any acceptance of using this as legal tender. Some people are looking away, some are okay with it, but India, as well as most countries around the world, are not willing to accept the usage of cryptocurrency as currency, and that is why globally these are called assets. Malta has the Virtual Financial Asset Act, and India is calling it virtual digital asset, which I think is a very good term for it, etc. I see that usage as a mode or medium of transaction, which by the way is only one of the purposes of money, but medium of transaction, we are still far away from it being prevalent.
Fair enough. All right, Ajeet. Thank you so much for joining in. And certainly, the more perspective one gets on this, the better it is, in my opinion, considering that this globally is in a bit of a nascent stage, if you will agree with me. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Bye bye.